The Cold War was a political and ideological conflict that lasted from the end of World War II in 1945 until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. The term Cold War was first used by the British writer George Orwell in an article published in 1945, and it was later popularized by the American journalist Walter Lippmann. The origins of the Cold War can be traced back to the late 19th century, when the Russian Empire began to expand and compete with the European powers for influence in Asia and the Middle East. This competition intensified after the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917, which led to the establishment of the Soviet Union and the spread of communist ideology around the world. During World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union were allies in the fight against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. However, the relationship between the two superpowers was always uneasy, as they had different political systems and conflicting interests. After the war, the Soviet Union sought to expand its influence in Eastern Europe and establish a buffer zone of friendly states to protect itself from a potential invasion. This led to a series of conflicts with the Western powers, including the Berlin Blockade of 1948 and the Korean War of 1950–53. The Cold War was characterized by a nuclear arms race, with both the United States and the Soviet Union developing and testing increasingly powerful weapons. The threat of nuclear war was a constant source of tension and anxiety, and led to a doctrine of mutually assured destruction that sought to deter either side from launching a first strike. The Cold War also saw the United States and the Soviet Union engage in a variety of proxy wars and covert operations around the world. The United States supported anti-communist forces in Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, while the Soviet Union backed revolutionary movements in Cuba, Nicaragua, and Angola. The end of the Cold War came about in the late 1980s and early 1990s, as the Soviet Union began to experience political and economic instability. The reforms of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev, including glasnost, openness, and perestroika, restructuring, led to a loosening of political controls and an opening up of the Soviet economy. In 1989, the Berlin Wall, which had been a symbol of the division between East and West, was torn down, and in 1991, the Soviet Union officially dissolved, bringing an end to the Cold War. The Cold War was not just a conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union, but a global struggle between two competing ideologies, democracy and capitalism versus communism and socialism. The two superpowers used their respective political and economic systems as tools to gain influence and support around the world. The United States promoted democracy and free market capitalism, while the Soviet Union advocated for state control of the economy in a one-party communist political system. These competing ideologies were the source of many conflicts and tensions between the two superpowers, as each side sought to prove the superiority of its system. One of the key events of the Cold War was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, in which the United States and the Soviet Union came dangerously close to nuclear war over the placement of Soviet missiles in Cuba. The crisis was ultimately resolved through a negotiated agreement, but it underscored the potential for nuclear war and the need for greater diplomatic efforts to prevent such a catastrophe. Another important aspect of the Cold War was the role of propaganda and cultural exchange. Both the United States and the Soviet Union used various means to promote their ideologies and gain support around the world. This included the use of radio broadcasts, film, literature, and art. The United States launched The Voice of America, which broadcast news and information about American culture and values around the world, while the Soviet Union created the International Department of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, which spread communist propaganda and supported revolutionary movements in other countries. The Cold War also had a profound impact on the domestic policies and politics of the United States and other Western countries. The fear of communism led to widespread suspicion and paranoia about internal subversion and espionage. This led to the McCarthy era in the United States, during which Senator Joseph McCarthy led a campaign to root out suspected communists and their sympathizers in government, academia, and the media. The end of the Cold War did not bring an end to all of the tensions and conflicts between the United States and Russia, but it did lead to a significant shift in the international system. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the end of the bipolar world order led to the emergence of new powers and new challenges in international relations. Today, the legacy of the Cold War can still be seen in ongoing conflicts and tensions around the world, as well as in the continued importance of nuclear weapons in international security. However, there is also a growing recognition of the need for greater international cooperation and diplomacy in order to address the challenges facing the world today.